matter that you'd like to bring up or to address. And what that means is that can include a wide range of things. We're really just looking at, well, questions that have to do with how do we live out our faith in everyday life. Questions maybe about a sermon that you heard recently, something that wasn't clear. Questions about the intersection of faith and public life. Really, anything that you want to talk about. And the format is a little more laid back tonight. I'll weigh in on your questions and thoughts, but you can feel free to give feedback to one another as well. So we just kind of keep it just open forum. And as I've said before, one of the things is, well, I guess the ways it benefits me is that I hear things from you from different perspectives, which is I always find very useful and beneficial, and hopefully it is for you as well. So I'm going to just go ahead and sort of open it up to you. And I know we're a little bit smaller group, so I hope at least someone has a question or a thought or a dilemma that you'd like to maybe raise, and we can spend a little time talking together. Hmm. Hmm. That's a very interesting question. It's a very big issue. Obviously, Doris is asking about the influx of immigrants in Europe, especially from Muslim countries like Syria and other places that are just leaving Syria and in just an incredible number, and then going into places like Germany, and then you're talking about too when they go to these schools, how yeah, sort of. Mm, right. Right. So I'm not that's I'm not an expert on everything that's happening right now in terms of the number of people who are becoming Christians, but I have heard in at least a number of places that right now the number of Muslims converting to Christ is, at least in some parts of the world, is unprecedented. In other words, there are more people now than ever before coming to Christ, and in part that's because for many of these countries, like you're mentioning, to be a Muslim is just sort of expected of everyone. You're sort of a Muslim because you're part of a Muslim country, and so they just label you a Muslim, but many people don't really practice it. I mean, some certainly do, but not, a good number don't really practice it. They don't take it that seriously. They're just Muslims in name. So when they immigrate and when they move to a place like Germany or the other European countries, they have an opportunity to, and a real openness to Christianity. And so I think we are seeing some of that conversion over to Christ. I think we're seeing more and more people becoming Christians, and I trust, and I have no reason to think that that's not, a genuine conversion. Now, what happens when they go back is a real challenge. I mean, because you're right, they would face a lot of backlash by, you're not allowed to convert if you're a Muslim. That, you're just not allowed to believe anything but the Muslim religion. I think that refers more to the end times. I think when that parable, when Jesus is talking about, when the Son of Man returns and will separate out the sheep from the goats, I take that to mean a future date even from now. So I don't assume that that's happening yet. That's my read on it, anyways. That it will happen when Jesus returns. So, anyone else want to weigh in on that, or? You've tapped into a major social concern today, and one that has big implications for us as Christians, and that's what do we do with immigrants? And of course, there's a lot that we could say about that, I suppose. But Jim. Mm-hmm. Mhm. Right. Yeah, that's come on, I can't think. Family of Faith in Kennewick, yeah, where Pastor Al actually are and Mary are members, and they've been doing it for a while. Yeah, does she? Yeah. My home church back, I still call it my home church, even though I haven't been there in almost 20 years. But the church I grew up in has been doing it with the same group. It's a group of people, the Karen people from Laos, I think. I think that's where they're from. Oh yeah, yeah, okay, right. So it started, I think, with the one group, but then it's expanded to other refugees from other countries. And my church back in Alberta has done a lot with the Karen people as well. They have their own separate church, but they partner with the English-speaking church, and it's really quite a remarkable thing. And yeah, it does a lot to, I think, practically show the love of Christ to people in need, and the teaching English. And the other thing they have to do a lot of is teaching driving skills because they're not used to driving in America, and so to help them get a job and to help them get acclimated and put down roots here, I love it that churches do that when there, especially when there's an influx of refugees into a particular city. So, anyone else want to weigh in on that, or oh, is that right? Is that right? Oh, I didn't see that. Okay. Hmm. Yeah. And it's a challenge. I mean, I think I think, this is sort of my personal take on it. I think it's a good thing that churches welcome and countries, quite frankly, welcome immigrants. Now you have to do it carefully and you have to have some safeguards in place. But I think it's important to welcome the stranger in. And I think as communities do that, then how can we do it? What part can we play? That takes a big investment of time and energy, but it's really I mean, the Israelites were told frequently to welcome the stranger among you and to make room and to be hospitable, and it's a very tangible way that we can show the love and kindness of Jesus himself. Now, it's not to say that you ignore or overlook the practical concerns. I mean, Europe is dealing with that now. They've welcomed, the countries that were very welcoming all of a sudden have had to say, wait a minute, we can't handle all these people all at once. But that said, I still think there's a way to do that, and it's really a tangible expression of Christian love, I think. Anyone else? Other thoughts on that, or you want to raise something else? I'm not going to weigh in too much on that. I think American culture has a lot to maybe to learn, actually, in terms of modesty and dress and that from other cultures. But so, I suppose so. Anyone else? Ooh. Great question. So how late do you all want to stay here tonight? Yeah. How do you put that in a question? I mean, faith and politics that's enough to say all kinds of things. But is that kind of what you're asking? How do we trust God's sovereign care over even political events and yet still try to look to Him for what's right and pleasing? I guess is what you're kind of getting at, or right? Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm going to turn it over to you all first before I try to weigh in. What do you think? I mean, Jim is raising that question. How do you, how do you choose who to vote for, and if the person you think would be the best fit, holds Christian principles and that kind of thing, they're not elected. Someone else is elected that you think is not good news. What do you do with that? So I don't know. What do you all think? Why don't you all weigh in first, and I can. I've never voted in an election before. This will be my very first year. So yeah, it's about time. Well, now I had an excuse. You understand? I wasn't a citizen until very recently. So, but I think so too. Right. I agree. I think it is like if those numbers are right, that 40% of Christians aren't voting. That would concern me. I mean, I could see some doing it as a sort of conscientious objection kind of thing, but if it's done out of apathy and I don't care, well, that's a lot of people, right? That's right, and I think it's a lot of people to say, well, they were purposely intentional. Yeah, it seems like apathy to me. If those numbers are accurate, and what do you think, Jerry? Time for a write-in candidate then, right? Yeah, I can too. And here's the thing. The challenging thing is if you look through, especially in the Old Testament, God is often using what we would look at as, say, very secular governments for His purposes, right? He's using a guy like Cyrus, who was this was not the kind of guy any of us would probably vote for. And yet God says, Cyrus is going to be my instrument for my purposes and my goals. And God says, I have a plan. I'm going to use him. Now that doesn't get him off the hook. So I think it helps to remember that. And I think it also helps to remember and be careful about how we define Christian government, if that makes sense. In other words, we sometimes want to vote for just the Christian candidate. And there's something very good about that. I think we want to vote for people that whose principles align with ours, right? But at the same time, a friend of mine who pastors in Iowa, he was actually interviewed by NPR this week because of the Iowa caucuses. He was in this interview and he said, we're not voting for a pope. In other words, what he's meaning is our job is not to elect the Christian pastor of America, right? We need a leader who's got character and who's got an agenda that closely aligns with ours, with what we think is best. And so you may vote, what that means is you may even choose to vote for someone who you think would be a better leader but may not necessarily be a Christian over someone who claims to be a Christian but would probably not be a very good leader, right? I mean, I think we can make that distinction as Christians. I think we can say, I love the fact that so-and-so is a Christian, and that's great, and but this person I think they'd be a better leader. I think they have a better grasp on issues that pertain to, national security or economy or all these other issues. So it's a fine line. Now, hopefully, you want those two spheres to overlap, but they're not always going to. It's tough. I don't know. Other thoughts on that, Tracy? That's right. That's right. Exactly. That's right. That's right. Because it seems what ends up happening is you can even get, like you said, two Christians, and they can even be running one from each party, and both can be genuine, sincere Christians, and yet they both value biblical things, but they value some more than others, and so it's a question of which one do you think is most needed at the time, right? But we have to really be careful about saying I'm going to vote for him or her just because she's a Christian. Well, I'm not sure that's always the way that even God would have us vote, right? And I want to be careful with that. I'm not trying to minimize the importance of Christian convictions and worldview shaping a person who might be in political office. But I want us to be a little careful about saying if it's a Christian, I automatically will vote for him or her, right? David. Right. 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 Mhm. Right. Mhm. Right. And exactly right. And that's right. Is there a Christian view on income tax? Well, there are some principles I think that guide that, but does a Christian conviction say flat tax versus, graduated income tax? Well, I'm not so sure you can. You can make that case. And yeah, again, you're getting at which which Christian principles are more important, right? I mean, caring for the poor is very important biblically. How does that play into the whole tax question and economic question? So, hmm right, and also the law of unintended consequences, right? We have good lofty ideals that are biblical and I think God would say yes, that's what I want, but the way that they come about, then if it a lot of times can have these unintended consequences that are not so good, and they do the opposite thing of what we would want. So, hmm that's right. That's right. We all tend to want to waive the well up. That's changing, but it seemed to be that now you had to really show and prove that you were a Christian if you hope to win public office. Now, I think we still see that, but not as strongly. That's just again, I've not voted yet, so some of you might be able to weigh in on that more. But you think back to when Kennedy was in office, there was real concern because he was a Roman Catholic, and that may have disqualified him. So he had to make his appeal. Well, we are way past that right now. But we still have some of that lingering sense that you need to show that you are a Christian if you want to appeal to a broad enough base of voters, which is always kind of an interesting thought for me, anyways. But other thoughts either on this, or if you want to raise a related issue or even a completely different issue. Yeah, good good point. Then you lose, in my mind, you lose a lot of your right to complain too loudly, right? Because you voted no. So yeah, but I think it is. I really do think it is very important that we vote. And I say that again as someone. I voted in two municipal elections, right, last May, and anyways, and I've in my whole life I've never been able to vote. I left Canada before there was an election, so I have never voted in a national election, and so I've been waiting this whole time. And I have an appreciation because to me it is a privilege that I've not yet been able to exercise. And I think as Christians we do need to take that seriously, and we do need to say, hey, here's a chance for myself as a Christian, for us as Christians, to play a part in our government. And God, again, God calls us, I think, to pray for our leaders and to live out our Christian faith in every arena that we have the opportunity, and not to withdraw from the world and isolate ourselves, which I think is not right. So maybe one more thought. Yeah, Joan. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Right. You may be familiar with the story of Judge Day. He is still a judge here in Salem, but he was brought up on, he would not perform same-sex weddings, and then he said he just was going to not perform weddings at all. And because of that, they opened a number of ethics investigations on him that were not even at all related to that, but it just seemed like a real smear campaign, and they have succeeded so far. It looks like they're going to recommend that he be removed from office, which is I think it's happened twice in the last I don't know how many years. It's a very rare thing. Um, and I think, yeah, the question is, where is God in that, right? Why would God allow something like that to happen? From what I understand, he's not only a Christian, but also a very good judge. Very fair. He established quite a number of ways to deal with, I think, veterans who had come home and were dealing with some of the fallout of being in combat. Well, he rather than put them all in jail when they did something wrong, he actually established some kind of court for them. So he's really doing some things that are positive for our community. And then you say, why would God allow this to happen? And I don't know. I can say that Jesus promised that it would, right? As Christians, if we live out our faith, we're not always going to be welcome. So in a way, we expect it. Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. That's right. It's yeah. That's right. It's in a fallen and sinful world, people are going to push their agenda, and that is going to just run head on into the Christian worldview. And we can expect that, and yet we can also trust that, like we were talking this morning, that God will restore all that has been lost. Now, how He does that in the end, I don't know, but I trust Him to do that. And so I think here's where I think the gospel really comes to bear on a situation like that. If we trust that God is still in control, and that in the end He will restore His people, then we're freed from the need to get even, to get back at people, to get vengeance, right? That's often our natural response, even personally in our own lives. We want to, I want to get back at someone who hurt me and who damaged me. We want to even the score. But if we say, you know what, God is going to do that in the end. I can let Him even it all out. He will sort it out far better than I ever can. Then that allows us to be the people who remain gracious and showing kindness even when even against all odds, like Judge Day. So, but to your question specifically, where is God? I trust that He's there. What is He doing? I don't know. Will He work it out in a way that's ultimately redemptive? I trust so, yes. Although that may not be for years, or even not even in this lifetime. So. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And if we can, right, how can we then respond to that in a way that says this is not going to destroy who I am? You can, so I can say because I'm a Christian, I can say, well, they can take my job away, they can take, my livelihood away, and it's terribly disappointing and it's disheartening. But in the end, it doesn't take away my fact that I belong, body and soul, and life and in death to Jesus Christ. Right. And so right, God then brings us through. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hmm. That's right. Hard as that often is. Yeah. So, David, you have one last comment. Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. That's right. Right. That's right. Right. What is not going to change on Wednesday, November 3rd, or whatever the date is Jesus is not going to be off His throne. He's still sovereign. He's still in control. And again, that's exactly right. That helps us. That keeps us from being bitter. Now, it ought not to create us to be lazy people. We ought not to say, well, God is on the throne, so who cares what we do? No. We can be motivated to live out our identity and our calling as Christians, but we do that in the certainty that He holds all things in His hand, like the song as we sang, right? This is my Father's world. So, hmm 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 That's exactly right. Exactly right. And it's still a world very much in need of redemption, and God has promised ultimately to do that. Hmm Right. Right. Some. Right. It's almost like our leaders are fallen people just like us, right? Um, let's come and we can close this time with a prayer, and then we'll sing yet one more time. Let's pray. Lord, you remind us in the Psalms. You ask that question: why do the nations rage? Right? Why do we look around and we see nations in uproar? We see governments that are restless. We see even in our own state and our own state legislature. We see um, nationally, we see all the promises that are made and then broken, and then disillusionment that seems to follow. Lord, as the psalmist says, there's a sense in which you look down on this and you laugh. Not laughing at us, but in a sense, the irony in all of it. We forget who's really in control. It's not one of us. It's not any of our elected leaders. It's not any of our people that you've put in place. Lord, they have authority that comes from you, but ultimately they're not sovereign. They can't fix the deepest problems that ail us. They can't solve the deepest problems of the human race. So, Lord, that actually brings us to you because you alone can do that. You alone are in control. You hold all things in your hands. And so when leaders are elected that we like or that we don't particularly care for, Lord, you're still in control. So help us to remember that, especially as we move forward this election season. Help us not to get so anxious that we turn to being very critical or cynical or talking in ways that just don't reflect the grace of Jesus. Help us to remember that after the election when maybe the people we'd hoped would get in didn't. Lord, help us to remember that each day as we serve you in the various ways that you've called us to serve. Help us to serve with diligence and with eagerness. Help us to serve faithfully because we're serving you and because we're serving you in the confidence that this is your world, all of it, every square inch of it. Lord, reassure us of that and remind us of that often. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's stand together and we'll sing number